Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the people who have joined the webinar today from whichever part of the world that you have joined. Welcome to all to our webinar, which is on security by design and security by default. This is brought to you by Ananta Technologies. So today we're going to talk about why security, which is something that we read, we talk about, and we experience daily, why is it so critical? Digital revolution, it has brought in a lot of changes, significant progress. We are constantly exposed to things like the internet being a part of your life. It's connected to everything that we do. It's simplified our lives. It's become so critical that it impacts directly all our economic prosperity, livelihoods, health, personal identity management, all of these things. It does all of these things, right? Along with, you know, and in today's world, what happens is security has become a interconnected activity. It is connected to every aspect of your life. So it's very clear that what we need is a very proactive approach to security. And that's where this webinar, Security by Design and Security by Default, comes in. Interestingly, today is also the World Password Day, making it a great moment for us to dive into this topic at hand. So let's get moving and let's look at moving beyond the mentality of plug in and embrace what's a proactive defense strategy. So please join me in welcoming the esteemed guests that we have on our panel today. We have Murali Ramchandran, who is a technology and cybersecurity advisor and CIO at StarTech. Murali, welcome.
Hi, Subbu. Pleasure to be on this show. Looking forward.
Thank you. And the other guest that we have is Amit Khanna. He's the founder at Great Works. Amit, welcome today.
Thank you, Subbu. I think it's a pleasure to be here and spend time with the panelists as well as with all of our guests who've been logging onto the webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And finally, we have Yogesh Yagnik, who is the CISO and Data Protection Act officer at Ananta Technologies. Yogesh, welcome.
Thank you, Sir Subbu, and it's great honor, Murli and Amit, to have you on this panel. We're looking forward for a great conversations.
Thank you. Before we begin today, here are a few housekeeping items for everyone to know. Your audio lines will be muted throughout the webinar. You can ask questions at any point of time during the webinar. All you need to do is go to the Q&A tab, which is right at the bottom of your screen. Just go in and type in your questions. We will take questions at the end of the webinar. Right? Okay, so let's jump right into this today. And let me once again welcome everybody. So we're going to explore what, various teams, especially software development, IT, some other functions, what's the kind of role that they play. We're also going to talk about how an organization can make itself more secure. What are some of the good strategies that they could talk about? So we'll dive into a lot of these kind of questions. So first, let me start with Murli. So Murli, when by design and security by default, what does that mean to you? Could you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. Thanks, Subbu, for the question. When we really look at about security by design and security by default, these are primarily principles in the field of cybersecurity that helps ensure that systems, products, and processes are inherently secure right from the outset rather than as a bolt on top of what has already been developed. Traditionally, that has been the things to say that a product is developed and then you start working on security and other things. So that's where this there is a slight difference in the approach that we take here. Specifically, since these are two separate terms, security by design, what it really means is emphasizing integrating security measures into the design and development phase of a product or system. So, therefore, it basically means that security requirements, threats, mitigation strategies, they are all baked in the initial stages of the design process itself. The advantage very clearly is that by embedding such security into the design, developers and product designers can create much more robust and resilient systems that are better equipped to withstand potential cyber threats. So that's from a security by design perspective.
Mhm.
Moving on to security by default, it moves on to the next stage of the evolution, because once a product is designed and developed, it has to be implemented and sustained. So that is where you start really looking at security by default, and how is it that you can adopt this principle, which means that security features are enabled by default in a system. Now, based on the industry that is relevant, right, for the enterprise, whether you're a fintech, health tech, you have various regulations like PCI DSS if you're handling
Right.
card related data, or if you're a health tech HIPAA, or GDPR and other privacy laws. How can some of the configurations that you set up in the product and software, that the application that you deploy, gets enabled by default, so that you are basically ensuring that you minimize risks associated with misconfiguration or oversight, etc. So that helps in the overall improvement of the overall cybersecurity posture for an organization.
Got it. Got it. That's so I have a follow-up question right from that one. When you just described that. So what do you think would be the kind of roles and resources that somebody would need when you talk about security? Do you think they need to come right at the start when you're doing design of a system? Because you spoke about security coming in right at the start.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you really look at it, security by nature is just not a technology problem, but it's basically a business issue, right? So when you really start looking at it, one needs to look at the business drivers which is driving this principle to be adopted. So once
Mhm.
you're able to understand the business drivers, you know which are the stakeholders that needs to be included, so that you can actually get that implemented effectively and successfully. So when you
Got it.
really look at security by design, the key business drivers would be, first of all, is ensuring customer trust. With so much cybersecurity being a boardroom agenda today,
Mhm.
and this is something that everybody is paranoid about. How do you really win customer trust? By demonstrating that the products and services that or applications that you're developing protects their interests.
Correct.
The second is regulatory compliance. Good or bad, we are all dealing with huge amount of regulatory compliance requirements, whether it is PCI, HIPAA, GDPR, blah, 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 right? Based on the industry that is relevant to you. And that's extremely important that you address it much earlier in the life cycle, so that you minimize the risk associated with regulatory compliance. The
True.
third is overall risk management. When you really talk about risk management, it ensures that you're able to mitigate some of these risks, because apart from regulatory compliance, you could be having risk associated with outages, downtimes, okay, loss of data, a lot of these things which can actually cripple the organization. Right? So you need to ensure that risk management is a key business driver for security by design. The fourth is cost savings. But
Mhm.
what I really mean by cost savings is that the later on in the life cycle that you catch a security bug, the more costlier it is to fix it, right? Because
Correct.
there is a lot of rework, etc. Now that is going to basically, that's directly cost.
Correct.
So that means you don't want a situation where after developing the software, you then send it to information security team, and then they come out with a huge number of bugs which need to be fixed. And last but not the least is, how can you develop competitive advantage? And when
Mhm.
I say competitive advantage, it's all about time to market. Okay. In a legacy format, security is always taken as a hindrance. But you shift left, get it in the design stage, get it by default, you automatically ensure that you're able to address security by design and ensure that you reduce the time to market, thus enhancing your competitive advantage. Now, this
Got it.
comes from its design perspective. Now, quickly jumping on to security by default,
Mhm.
obviously ensuring that some of these templates are rolled out automatically during implementation reduces human error, right? You have streamlining of deployment. You don't have deployment processes are much more faster. It is time, the deployment time reduces significantly.
Right.
It minimizes vulnerabilities, which is there, which you have to again fix. Again, all those things goes back to the cost savings that we talked about. Enforcing some of the best practices that are there, okay, resulting in lower potential risk of cyber breach. And last but not the least is facilitating compliance, right? Your ability to say, I am applied the PCI DSS template or a HIPAA template. These templates are ready-made available. So that means from an audit perspective and other things, you are much more streamlined. So some of these business drivers will determine the number of roles or the number of people that need to be required. So as you can very clearly see, I'm not going to go through it in detail, but all these means that all stakeholders have to be involved to
Correct.
ensure that this is done effectively to drive business outcomes.
Great, great. So, now, Amit, I have a question for you, which is taking up from what Murali said, which is around business drivers. So these principles, how do you think they would align themselves to some of the top security concerns that an organization faces when they put in their efforts to, how does it align to their business goals?
Sure. Thanks for that, Subbu. And I think thanks, Murli, for giving that perspective. Subbu, and I want to start with a quote. And, here it goes. And I think it'll cover broadly a large spectrum of organizations globally. And if there are a few which do not fall into it, they'll be the lucky ones. But anyways, what the quote says is there are two types of organizations in the world. The first ones, those who have been breached and they know it. And the second one are the ones that are breached and they don't know it, right? So by and large, that's how the lay of the land is. So, if you look at cybersecurity and, it's not a technology agenda. It is a business agenda. Now, when we talk about aligning, security with business goals, this is a two-way street. So the IT organization or the InfoSec organization needs to be clear in terms of what are the business objectives of the organization. Taking a cue from that, we start stitching this into the overall organization fabric. Similarly, as it is an organization or it's an organizational agenda or a business agenda, security, and the cybersecurity piece starts, getting into the fabric of the organization. For example, the staff performance goals, the supplier performance measurements, they have to be dependent on the overall, security measure from an organization perspective. Also, it's fairly important that the business goals are distilled and they are probably, made available to different parts of the organization. For example, the IT team needs to understand the business strategy and, they need to understand the overall objectives so that the security strategy could be woven into it. Similarly, at a boardroom level, the C-level executives, they need to understand, very clearly by the IT team, or they have to be given that importance in terms of what is that they need to do from an overall security perspective. And communication has to be very clear from the IT back into the leadership as well. Similarly, I just want to probably take it a little, deeper, from there, where importance of cybersecurity, it cannot be understated, right? So it's a fairly important topic. And I think it has to go hand in hand with business objectives, Subbu.
Got it. Great. I really love that quote of yours. It's very interesting about how people know whether they're being breached or they don't know, but either way they have been breached. So I really like that. I do have a follow-up question for you. So what happens is most organizations, when they grow, and of course, every organization wants to grow, but there are some who kind of set a faster pace of growth for themselves. For them, they consider, in some sense, security to be a hindrance, a hurdle for them. And, so they tend to either go around or do something or take shortcuts, maybe. How would you say, how could a business handle this, but manage this much better? How should it balance itself with the business goals?
So it's a very interesting, question, and it is like something that we know we have to do, but due to, situation beyond our control, we don't do it. And just the best example is brushing your teeth in the night, right? I mean, all of us want to do it, but there are times which you just don't happen to do it. So to just give you a perspective, in any organization, big or small, the basic tenets of cybersecurity have to be followed. If they aren't, if there is a bypass to that, it starts becoming a bigger problem. It balloons into a domino effect later. Let me give you a couple of examples. For example, all of my IT administrators do a fine job in terms of setting password length to a 14 character. They have to be changed every 45 days, etc. But there are people who would say, I do not want to follow this, and let's probably change it to something else. Similarly, there are instances where certain websites have been blocked from an organization perspective, but there are ways and means from a business perspective where we would say we want access to those. So I think by and large, once you start making an exception to policies like these, that's where the trouble starts happening. So to answer your question, these policies are made for an organization to thrive and support them from a business perspective. They should not be looked at hindrances which are probably going to affect the business, but they are more in line. And as I said, they have to be woven inside the organization fabric, Subbu.
Got it. Thank you so much for that, Amit. Murli, you touched upon business drivers, and Amit spoke a lot more in detail about business goals and how it should be balanced, or rather, security can balance itself with business goals. Could you elaborate on some of the strategies that companies could take for implementing and maintaining security by design, security by default?
Sure, Sabhu. So I will start off by quoting that execution needs strategy for breakfast. So what is extremely important is strategies are fine, but what is important is going to be how do you make it executable and sustainable. So
Mhm,
when you really look at implementing and maintaining security by design and security by default, it requires a combination of strategic planning, technical implementation, and ongoing monitoring and adoption. So which is the sustenance, right? You start to know everything that is there, which is there. So therefore, so the way I look at it is some of the strategies that can be used for effectively implementing and maintaining both these approaches are, first of all, by establishing very clear cybersecurity objectives. Now,
mhm,
the objectives has to be aligned with business goals, regulatory requirements which are applicable to the industry.
mhm.
That's going to be extremely important. That means that you have to know what is relevant to you, what are the statutes that are relevant to you, and ensure that some of those things are taken into account in the entire exercise. Associated with that is also to ensure that are you doing a proper identification of security risks and threats that are relevant to the organization's assets. So that means you start looking at your asset register, start looking at what is the relevant risks and threats that are associated with that, right? The second part of it is to also ensure that how do you integrate security into the overall development life cycle of any product or application that you're deploying in your infrastructure, in your environment. So how
Mhm.
do you embed security considerations into the entire development life cycle? Now, now what you want to follow depends on what is it that you do as an organization, whether you follow waterfall, agile, you do continuous CI/CD pipeline. So depending on whatever it is, you need to ensure that you would follow a strategy like DevSecOps,
Mhm.
or building in security tools at a developer level where somebody checks in codes at that time. Apart from functional testing, you also do security testing at that point itself, so you catch it much earlier into the life cycle. The
Got it.
third is to continuously keep doing risk assessments. While you'll take care of development, you'll take care of your planning, and you deploy, the risk threat vectors are changing on a daily basis. So how do you ensure that you continuously keep doing risk assessments and making those changes to ensure that you're maintaining your security posture? The fourth is implementing security architecture patterns. So you need to understand some of the patterns that are there. For example, how do you deploy defense in depth principles into your development lifecycle? Are you using secure communications protocols, encryption, access control privileges, some of these things which are much more than the functional elements of the product or application that you're developing? How do you incorporate some of these things into your entire you know security by design and security by default principle? The
Very true.
fifth is using automation. Okay, today AI ML automation is significantly used. It can actually auto remediate a lot of the problems that you see. thus eliminating human intervention, human errors and other things that can significantly improve your posture around it. Next point I would like to cover is to how are you going to ensure that you're continuously focusing on security awareness and training, because people is the weak link among all these things that you do, right? So ensuring that while technology teams do their things, they have to be also trained, because every developer, their understanding of how they deploy security is going to be extremely important. And of course, various stakeholders right up to the user, who may just be a user. How do you ensure that all those things are taken care of? The seventh, I would say, is about enforcing least privilege access, because we are all here to protect our jewel crowns. How do you ensure that you do least privilege access on a need to know basis, so that you're able to ensure that some of these things are effective? While you do all these things, and then, I go back to the quote Amit said about getting breached or already breached. So you know that you're going to get breached. So how are you going to take care of your cyber resilience? Do you have the monitoring mechanisms, response mechanisms to quickly react to security incidents so that you arrest the damage?
Great.
Next point is about continuously focus on improving your security posture, because
Right.
always keep in being informed on what are the emerging threats that are impacting you. Do threat hunting, look at intelligence feeds, industry forums, security communities. So start looking at all this information so that you look at what is relevant. Of course, you need to have a mechanism to filter out the noise and ensure that you're creating this as a strategy to effectively implement security by design and security by default. And last but not the least, fostering a culture of security within the whole organization.
Sure.
That's going to be extremely important, both in terms of awareness as well as accountability, right from top level management to the frontline employees who are actually driving the organization, right? And enable collaboration between the teams, because security is everybody's problem. It's a business problem and just not a technology problem. I would say these are probably 10 strategies that comes to my mind, which I can share in terms of how you could effectively implement and monitor security by design and security by default.
I think that's a very comprehensive list, Murli, and I'm sure our audience should be taking down notes on these, because that's as comprehensive a list that you can find anywhere, and this is coming from the horse's mouth himself. So thank you so much for that. Moving on to Amit, security again is taken to be primarily the responsibility of CISOs or IT departments, and maybe it's kind of restricted to software development teams. That's the general feel. Uh, what other functions in the business, what other teams in the business do you think play a role in building that comprehensive framework which is needed for security by design and default?
Thanks for that, Subbu. And again, as I stated earlier, and as Murli probably, said that as well, security isn't a technology agenda, and it's a business agenda. Hence, every employee's got a role to play, to adopt and abide by the security framework. And let me start, taking, an overall view. So if you look at any organization, HR is usually the first and the last point of contact for every employee.
Right.
Therefore, it's a very, very important role that HR plays in terms of creating and maintaining a robust, our cybersecurity culture. A strong partnership between HR, InfoSec, and IT is essential for managing, data technology risks. Particularly if you look at the ecosystem today, people are working from home. In most of the organizations, people work from home. And as I was speaking to somebody else some time back, he said, if internet is available on the moon, they are ready to send people, and people can work off the moon as well. So I think by and large, just to summarize this point, I think when you start looking at the landscape, HR becomes a very, very important start point from an overall cybersecurity training perspective. And HR's involvement has increased because training, for the employees, it's become fairly dynamic. As Murli mentioned earlier, our threats are a lot more dynamic, and there are refreshers which need to be done to make sure there is a good cybersecurity, hygiene, which is followed from an employee perspective. And I think with my in organizations which train employees to handle, you know, stuff like phishing, stuff like social engineering. They need to be taught how to do that so that, God forbid, if an eventuality occurs, users are a lot more prepared than probably, getting, caught off guard. The other, fairly important group in any organization is the finance group for us. Now, as Murli mentioned, there are crown jewels for all of us is data and money, right? And I think finance has got, probably a wealth of both, which is money as well as, data. So the finance teams have to be trained to be aware of social engineering, phishing. By and large, we've seen, they will get phishing emails, which will talk about currency transfers, which will talk about invoices not paid. The CEO wants something, so on and so forth. So that becomes a fairly important group to take care of. And it can be only done if they are imparted the right training. The third most important team before we get into IT is going to be the sales team. Now, all of our sales guys are tasked with getting new business. They go into uncharted territories. They meet people. They respond on emails. They take social media, LinkedIn, so on and so forth. So that's another team which needs to be very well, they need to be, skilled or probably upskilled in terms of how to manage that entire piece. So I think those are the three teams. I'm not talking about business teams because I think they're the bread earners and there is enough and more probably, which is done for them. I'm not going to touch into what the IT team needs to do because Murli has comprehensively touched that. So maybe these are the things that I feel we need to do from a larger ecosystem perspective to cover the overall framework, Subbu.
Thank you so much for that, Amit. I mean, when you said sales team, so I hope all the sales guys out there are listening to this because security is your baby as much as it is for any of these software development people. Great. So thank you so much, Amit. Now, let me move on to Yogesh, who's been silent for quite some time, and let me probably ask him a few questions here as well. So, Yogesh, when we say security by design, we emphasize on building security from ground up. And both Murli and Amit have touched upon their views about building it ground up. Could you speak a little about how does VDI or virtual desktop infrastructure align itself with this principle?
All right, thanks, Subbu. I think if I simply state in a single statement, I can confidently say that VDI is security. It sums up everything almost. But what I mean is that with all the buzz around security, it is important to remember that we already have a solution in at this VDI solution that enhances the security posture at the same time enabling the workforce to be productive at the all time. So it is a great combination, and the default security parameters, the offering it brings in, I can name them and it can go on and on. But while virtual desktop infrastructure has been around for decades now, it is also important to know that its approach for the security to continually adapt to the addressing the security, it evolves and it makes more and more resilient towards security. At the same time, meets the regulatory requirement. So that's also look at the VDI we had 10 years back versus now. There is a paradigm shift, right? In great more focus on security. At the same time, great more focus on complying to the regulatory requirements and the security posture. VDI is a solution that gives users access to their apps and data with a great deal of security. That's what I can summarize about it. And it also enables IT team to implement uniform security policies, controls patches, for example, across all virtual desktop in a centralized way. The centralized approach not only streamlines the security management, but also it ensures that consistency and compliance with regulatory requirements are also met, right? And it works very seamlessly with your, say, access control, identity management, or authentication technologies, like multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, and I can name them, many of them. No? Additionally, it also gives you a granular uh, access control, allowing administrators to tailor permissions based on the business roles. Every employee who logs into the virtual desktop environment, their roles and responsibility, we can granularize their access. It also limits the exposure to sensitive data because of this particular aspect, and it also minimizes the potential impact of security breaches. If I state furthermore, its inner scalability. VDA is it has got an inner scalability and flexibility, which empowers business to adapt to evolving security threats, and the regulatory landscape, because regulatory landscapes are also changing. Some time back, we didn't have a privacy issue, but now with the GDPR, and in India, DPDP, and even UK is passing a law recently, saying that the security by default, there are certain parameters they have defined, including eliminating the weak passwords. Anything that connects to the internet must have certain basic security controls. So those are the things which VDA can handle it seamlessly, easily, and it can scale up. At the same time, meets the business need of business continuation and minimum disruptions.
Got it.
So, I mean, there are many things we can talk about. VDA is actually nothing new, but it has been around in one form or the other for about 30 years now. And as long as there is a Windows native or Linux native applications that end user consumes, VDA will be relevant technology, and always been at the core of it is the security. That's what I can talk about.
Thank you so much, Yogesh, for that. Would you be able to quickly touch upon an example of, how you would have used VDI for enhancing security for any of your clients?
Oh, okay. There are many, but
Just give me one, that's it.
Yeah,
In the
so
interest of time.
absolutely. So I think for a given client, when a VDA solution is required for people to work from home, say for example, and as Amit said, from moon as well, the basic security controls which VDA offers by design is phenomenal. For example, you can roll out a read-only, non-persistent OS image for a given role of or a given set of users. Could be a finance team, could be HR, could be production users. What I mean to say by this is read-only and not persistent, that when every time you log off, a new virtual desktop comes up. It refreshes by itself. You don't have an older instance, so all the previous sessions are wiped out. When you log off, the desktop is deleted and a new one is created from the golden image. So golden image is something which is a crown jewel within the virtual infrastructure, which any service provider or IT team will make it sure that it carries the right OS image, right application set, right security controls, and right security patch levels. Another thing, a great thing would be it enables you to use any endpoint. Could be your own system, could be a enterprise or organization provided desktops or laptops. It can prevent access to the local desktop environment. What I mean to say, if you use your own laptop, which is, say, for example, not rightly patched at a right level, the VDI, as soon as you log into VDI session from your system, it completely cuts off your local resources. You don't have access to your hard disk. You don't have access to anything else. You can't copy or paste from VDI to local machine or vice versa. So that way is very more secure. That way the data of leakage is also getting prevented, right? You can also say there are so many other examples. Key logging can be disabled in a jiffy. You can restrict screen capture, screen share. So I mean, even idle sessions will be logged off after a certain amount of time. So there is no question of session hijacking and somebody else taking over your session, etc. And then I can go on. You can even whitelist a given system that only this system can log in if through virtual infrastructure. I mean, I have still more thing, but I think positive time. I'll
Yeah,
leave
so
it
in the interest of time, and I think Amit wants to add something to your point over here, so I'll just let Amit come in.
No, I think, Subbu, while Yogesh has covered most of the points from a DAS perspective, I think giving, a view from from an overall security perspective, I think one of the things that I personally like about DAS is it's airtight. So whatever happens on the BYOD or a third party endpoints does not filter into your environment. So that's the most beauty of that. It's very safe. From an IT team's perspective as well, manageability is a lot more better because start putting controls. They can get a lot of data in terms of what is happening. There are versions which can do a geofencing, making sure that people from right areas and geographical locations probably come in. There is posture check which could be done, which probably helps not only the organization but also extends a lot of comfort for the customers as well. And there is there are a lot of APIs that we could use for upstream integration to make sure it becomes a lot more efficient from an overall environment perspective. So I think those are the areas that I wanted to mention. I'm not going to get into MFA and other areas. I think Yogesh has very finely covered that. Back to you, sir.
Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amit, and thank you so much, Yogesh. So now we actually open the session to questions. And while I do say that and questions will pop up, I already have a question which came in a few minutes ago from one of the participants over here. So I'm just going to read it out. And then, only Amit, one of you could probably answer this one. So AI and cybersecurity. What are the top challenges or opportunities that lie ahead of us when you consider various aspects of security parameters to be looked at?
Sure, I can take it if you want, okay, and maybe I'll request other panelists to add. See, obviously, AI has huge number of opportunities, right? So let me first start with the opportunities before we delving into some of the challenges, right? So if you look at key opportunities that is there, very clearly the ability to have the sophistication around threat detection is going to be extremely important. So the applicability of AI in threat detection and response is one great area where the AI can make a significant opportunity. This can actually enable organizations to be able to proactively and very quickly react to potential response to threats and other things, reducing the time that it takes for attackers to maneuver through the environment that is there. The second is obviously also about automated cyber defense. Once you're attacked and you're able to detect it, if you are able to actually go back and defend yourselves well and arrest damage, because otherwise, if you look at the legacy way of doing things, somebody in the SOC monitors it, okay, and then you trigger off an alarm to get some experts to come in, and then you get a network expert, you get a systems expert, and everybody starts doing all the things around it. It could take, I think, reasonable amount of time. Now that's one area where I see a huge amount of opportunity that is there. The third is predictive analytics, right? Because now with so much of data that is there, and so let's go back to some of the things that we have always learned in the past, right? The attacker normally resides in a dormant mode in an organization for quite some time, though of course that is shrinking. various reports will talk about various days, whether it is 800 days or whether it is now 80 days or whatever it is. Now that keeps changing, and I don't want to get into that, but extremely important that with the huge amount of data that is getting generated, you can actually do a lot of predictive analytics based on behavioral patterns that you see around the data that is getting captured, log data that is getting captured, and that can actually give you a lot of insights into what sort of probably predict some sort of issues that could come in for you. The fourth area is behavioral analysis, and again, this also can be used both not from the system side but also user side, right? Can you also use this much more proactively to determine some of the other things that we have been talking in the last 40 minutes, right? About how do you use this to customize your awareness sessions. So if you can get some trends to say there are certain behavioral patterns that you identify, you can run programs, you can create awareness campaigns structured around it. Okay. Phishing can be okay, but within phishing you can actually go categorize it and do what is it that you want to do. And the last but not the least is around looking at adaptive security posture. That really means that you actually are dynamically adjusting your security posture based on changing threats. Now, you always have seasons, you'll have a season when you suddenly see some zero-day attack has come in today. You need some immediate reactions around it. And that is something that you need to do much faster. So how is it that you can adapt to some of these things? Now, these are what I believe as opportunities that are there. Moving on to some of the challenges, AI does have its own set of challenges. It's not that it doesn't have set of challenges. Now, some of the challenges that I see is one is related to what we call as adversarial attacks. What we really mean here is, sometimes you can actually some systems like your intrusion detection systems, malware classifiers detection systems can be vulnerable to adversarial attacks, and sometimes it could get misled with some modifications to input data. So if somebody could actually get into your environment and modify that data, the interpretation could be different and actually the actions taken would be different. So you can actually fool the AI model also to that extent, right? The second is around data privacy, because all AI models require a lot of data.
Correct.
So you need to give a lot of data to train so that it learns better and better, and it's much better, so that your effectiveness is much more improved. That means you're actually giving access to a lot of data which may have a lot of information, which may potentially go intrude into your data privacy requirements and policies that you
Personally
have.
identifiable information as well.
Correct. Third is around bias and fairness. I think there are a huge number of cases. I don't want to get into examples that are there, where there are biases that are present in the way data is structured. So sometimes, be it on the way data is there, you can actually create biases in the systems. There have been many cases where racial discrimination, sexual discrimination, and all these things have happened because of bias that's there in the data. The fourth is around scalability, because we still have to see how scalable these systems are as you get more and more data. So how much will it take, and especially scalability from a real-time perspective. That means you're also going to give a lot of GPUs, right? Capacity, which is going to increase your cost. So scalability in an economical manner is something that you may have to look at, because how do you really, especially when you want to get it as real-time as possible. And last thing that I wanted to talk about is AI algorithms are still black boxes for everybody.
Very true.
So you only do input and you see an output, right? So many times you don't understand the reasoning behind how these AI models, algorithms work. They may not, many people don't understand that, and that could be a risk or a challenge that you'll have to go through. Now, again, at a very high level, I just thought I'll cover about 5 opportunities and challenges. But on an overall basis, if I have to sum it up, while there are challenges, I think the opportunities are much higher, as long as you can manage and reduce the impact of some of these challenges by harnessing and focusing on some of your data quality and some of these strategies that you have to use. I'm sure this is something that's going to grow exponentially as we move ahead.
True. Thank you so much for that, Murali. If I may add one more challenge, AI also consumes a lot of power, consumes a lot of cooling to keep all of those engines and those machines and everything running. So for organizations that are focused on environment and sustainability, it becomes then an ethical question. Should I start using AI to, manage some of the activities, especially around security, which, like you rightly said, it's always on. You can never switch it off. Great. We have one more question here, and Yogesh, maybe you may want to take this one. This talks about in a DaaS environment, we have to secure the underlying hypervisor and the guest OS. Which becomes the first priority at that point?
All right. So see, the underlying hypervisor bar and far is secure because it runs on a not on any native operating system, but it's a closed operating system developed by the DaaS provider. The virtual desktop OEM. So that bar and far is secured unless there is and of course we keep hearing about there are certain hypervisors are getting attacked and that particular vulnerabilities are getting also fixed by the OEMs, because there you can't do much. It's completely under control of the OEM, right?
Right.
Now, coming to the operating system, which is given to the as a virtual server or virtual desktop, that is where you have a control on. So if you feel that, or if you suspect that you need to prioritize, there is nothing called as a priority between these two. I would suggest that instead of looking at the criticality of issue or a vulnerability on either on a hypervisor level or operating system level, what we should be doing, and that requires a paradigm shift, that we should look at the patching or the vulnerability fix by with the risk in mind. If how risky that it is it being exploited in the wild already? Is it a zero-day attack? Is it something which affects my core business process or core business systems? Does it affect the things which are accessible over internet? So those are the questions we should be asking. And I think I've recently written a blog post in our website. How should we look at your vulnerability management? We should move away from those criticality based, critical, high, medium, low, or N-1, N-2, 0-day. That things we should now be moving to a risk-based approach to mitigating those issues or vulnerabilities. And I think we have a strong material we can give it to the audience later on after this particular thing. But yes, this is the take on this particular question.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Yogesh. I have one more question here, which I think was answered by Amit during the session. So let me just summarize that one. So the question is, what steps can companies take to foster a culture of security awareness and responsibility among employees? And I think Amit detailed a lot about how HR can take various steps for this, which includes training, which includes running things like phishing campaigns within, so that companies can educate their employees and make them work better. So I think there are several such steps that can be taken, and companies can prepare their employees to be more security focused than anything else. I mean, do you want to quickly touch upon any further steps that you think that companies could do?
Sure, and thanks for that. So I think HR and information security or cyber security IT teams need to start working together on this. And as I said, we need to start preparing our employees for something which does not look right. So for example, if a phishing email comes in, what is that they need to do? Also, we must make sure we should keep this in mind. Depending on what sector the audiences are from, the churn rate could vary from 5% to 25%, depending on what industry that people come in from. So what we've seen with the data, most of the times if there is a, a malicious, attack happens, it happens at a frontline level, where somebody who's probably coming into a new organization, if somebody's a management trainee, etc., they do not know how to, go about addressing these challenges. So I think the idea is to work cohesively, to work jointly, and make sure our employees are aware if they see something suspicious, what is that they need to do. So I think that's where directionally it goes up, and then we take the upstream route in terms of following the overall security framework. So that's what I wanted to add.
Great. Thank you so much.
Maybe if I can add here, Subbu, maybe just
Sure.
a point. When you say employees, the way I look at it is there are two types of employees, right? One is the tech team employees who are actually administrators and managing this. The second is end users who are not
Right.
tech side, but they are basically users of the technology environment, right? So, while I think, I mean, did talk about a lot on this phishing and other things, which is applicable right across. If you look at it, there are two types of things which is there. One basically is, you try to take the vulnerability of an employee by phishing and other things which is there. The second is also about how attacks happen using credentials that are used, right? One is you lose your credentials because that's the easiest way to enter, right? You get for anybody, a hacker to basically enter into your environment. So one is to misuse of your credentials using weak passwords. And that's where it comes back to some of the earlier things that even Amit had alluded to in terms of how to ensure that IT teams have strong processes to ensure that your identity management is very strong. One of the weaknesses that typically is exploited is IDs which are dormant in the system, not of employees who are actually active, and that is getting misused because you don't have identity and access management tools and processes in place. Some of these things could even have elevated access, which can actually put the risk much higher than what it is there for an organization.
Right.
So if you really look at it from an employee's perspective, I don't know what the question was, but we need to look at it from the perspective of creating accountability at different levels based on their role or the persona that they have hold within the organization. So you have end users, you have administrators and other things. So and you actually have to customize awareness based on their role.
So various stakeholders, various functions that they, yeah, I think that's absolutely right. It's not, one mold that can fit right across.
One shoe, one size fits all. Yeah.
One size fits all. Absolutely right.
Yeah, on a word password day, and this is a right, Murli rightly touched upon that the credentials getting exploited. Today is the right day to talk about that credential, how to safeguard it. One, obviously, you will have to set a long and complex password with also ensure that you have a technology to eliminate the passwords which are already exploited or available in the darknet forums. Dictionary based passwords, you should be avoiding it. There are technologies available to enforce that by default, while you set up password. And most importantly, you also encourage all employees to use a password vaults. That's where you can generate a complex password. You can also store your credentials, and it is a very safe method to make sure that your passwords are not only safely stored, but you can retrieve it when you want. Don't write it on some Word file or a TXT file or some post-it. That's the right message for the today being a password day.
Very well said.
So if all of us have to follow what Yogesh says, then download a password vault, which will generate the password, save it over there, and then lock the vault with one password. So you just have to remember one, and the app does the rest for you. Great. Amit, were you about to say something? I guess
that's what I was saying. Yogesh has taken up, the very apt example for the password day in terms of sharing that with everybody. So kudos for that. Thanks for that, Yogesh.
Great. Thank you so much once again. That's all the time we have in terms of questions. There are a few more questions. So for people who wrote in those questions, what we will do is we will write back to you with the responses. We will consult the panelists and then we'll get the answers and write them back to you. Let me just spend a minute in summarizing some of the points that we covered today in terms of our webinar. So we spoke about security by design. It's a concept which emphasizes on you creating solutions that adequately prevent any security threat or attack or from any exploitation happening or any compromise. We spoke about risk assessments, we spoke about implementing protective controls, we spoke about a defense in-depth strategy. Security by default, it's the next stage. And as Murali rightly said, it's the next stage in the organization's evolution, where companies can actually ensure that any unnecessary or insecure services and features are turned off. So, no more dead usernames and dead employees who are still existing in the system. So it allows you to build a culture around the entire thing being security by default. Some of the key business drivers that we spoke about were customer trust, regulatory compliance, risk management, cost savings, and competitive advantage, wherein we spoke about time to market, wherein we looked at how shifting the security aspect to the left, which is moving into the design stage, allows the company to take advantage of all these drivers and align themselves to their business goals in a much better manner. We spoke about the business goals being distilled, woven into daily business so that it is run by various functions. A stat that I picked it up when I was doing some research on this topic, that is, cyber attacks are on the rise. And when I say that they're on the rise, and this is going back to what Amit said earlier about how companies are either aware or not aware of them being breached, I would completely second that, because every business is being hit with a cyber attack 39 seconds. Every 39 seconds, there is a cyber attack. So we really are having to do a lot of work around this area. We also looked at some real life examples of how security is very critical in today's digital era. We looked about how VDI, or virtual desktop infrastructure, DAS, desktop as a service, can significantly enhance cybersecurity in many ways. We spoke about centralized management. We spoke about enhanced access control, data protection, how you can isolate endpoint security threats, auditing, monitoring, automated security operations, and a lot of best practices for compliance and robust security. With that, I would say we have covered what we wanted to touch upon, some of the points in today's webinar, which is security by design and security by default. The insights from Murali, Amit, and Yogesh, I hope they have given you a very good understanding, great insights into some of the crucial security principles and how you could implement them within your organization. You're welcome to write to us. In case you need more information, we would be happy to add more information to what you need, any kind of help that you seek. We are absolutely happy to help you over there. Thank you so much once again to the panelists, Murali, Amit, and Yogesh. Really appreciate your time and your inputs and all the great examples and thoughts that you shared in today's session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye.